I'm Nick Westergaard, and this is On Brand, helping you tell your story. Branding is losing its personality. In the race for digital efficiency, the world has succumbed to blanding, clean, neutral, and entirely safe design built for algorithms instead of people. Mark Nichols, creative director and co-owner of WMH&I, joins the show to challenge this rise of system-friendly simplicity. He shares why the brands that truly matter must push against global scalability, embrace their unique quirks, and design for humans, even if it means not being for everyone. My interview with Mark Nichols is coming right up. But first, Mark Nichols, welcome to On Brand.
Hey, Nick, good to be here today. I've been looking forward to this one.
I've been looking forward to it too because it allows me the opportunity to say, in the parlance of rom-coms, you had me at blanding. So I love this case that you've been making recently about logos and identities being stripped of their quirks for this sake of digital scalability and machine efficiency. How did we let the algorithms take over the creative process like this?
I think it's been around for some time now. I think there's several contributing factors to it. You know, people are looking for accessibility, legibility as we start to scale brands digitally. And I think the rise of digital is really that instigator of people stripping back. And I think often it comes under the guise of contemporary as well. And I'm not sure that by stripping back and getting to simplicity necessarily alludes to contemporary. But there's a multitude of reasons, really. I think the fact that brands are instantly global these days. You know, our devices in our pockets mean that a brand is instantly global. Anyone can access that brand from anywhere in the world, give or take. And I think, therefore, brands are worried about creating meaning in their brand that might be culturally misinterpreted or culturally less relevant in one market to it as another. So play it safe, strip it back, don't have anything in there that could offend, but at the same time, do you take everything out that can appeal and can resonate emotionally by stripping back to such simplicity?
Yeah, as we were talking about this, it seems like my own observation of this, I feel like I see things and I say, that looks like a very carefully designed brand. And I don't necessarily mean that as a compliment. No offense to anyone working very hard to do that work. But there is something about that feeling that sort of lacks authenticity. You talk a lot about quirks too, and I think that's a way, because I think authenticity is important, but is sometimes overused. But the idea of embracing quirks, I think, is a big part of what's missing for a lot of brands out there.
Yeah, there's kind of 2 points I pick up on what you said there. People are carefully crafting this neutrality into their brand. Brand owners are paying millions of pounds to have their brand stripped back, you know, to these kind of personality-less manifestations of themselves. So that's one part of it. But distinctiveness, I think, is absolutely key. So it's not about being different and different for the sake of it. Like, that's not going to land. But you have to be distinctive, and you have to stand up for something and look like something that is going to resonate with your audience. And there's facts that prove that, facts and stats. And I've got a couple of them just as a nod here that we could probably talk about. I mean, JKR, brilliant other London branding agency, in Ipsos, they did some research into distinctive assets, and, you know, found out that only 15% of brand assets are actually distinctive, and therefore only 15% of brands, you know, with their distinctive nature can be recalled and be memorized by consumers.
So you point to brands like eBay, Yves Saint Laurent shedding their distinctive traits to become more ecosystem friendly. So flipping it the other way, when a legacy brand comes to you wanting to modernize, how do you protect the eclectic elements that drive human connection while also achieving that goal of modernizing, or is that goal wrong?
I think, when we've come with brands that have got heritage or they've got certain category codes that probably they need to adhere to still appeal to their audience. I think particularly of high-end whiskey that we do a lot of work for. We work for Pernod Ricard. And we've touched a lot of their portfolio, but the way that we design or redesign a brand world is to really bring emotional connection into it. So without throwing away everything that is there, what can we optimize? What can we elevate? But importantly, why are we elevating and why we're optimizing each of those things? And it's for better connection with that brand. It's for better storytelling from that brand. So with Redbreast whiskey that we did recently, we didn't strip back the personality. We lent into layering, into richness, into the metallics, into the bird, which was the mascot that came to life differently at every brand interaction, every digital touch point. You encounter that bird in the way that you would encounter that bird in the wild. It's fleeting, it's different each time. So bringing nuance into it, but that creates a personal connection with that brand instead of stripping the personality out. And I think for us, in this particular use case, it was how do we evoke the brand sensorially through digital in the same way as you would want to sensorially experience that brand in hand, through the pack, through the beautiful detail of print, through the smell of the product. How do we start to evoke that? You're not going to do that by stripping back for digital, taking it back to the that a sans serif and that carefully crafted neutrality that we talked about. Actually, this is a case for maybe being a bit maximalist and sort of appealing to all of the senses.
I think that's a really good point, and yeah, you had me cracking up about the stripped down sans serif, no mark. We know what it looks like. You alluded a bit to your work at WMH&I, and you also talk about being intentionally sector agnostic. And I think that this is interesting because with my own agency and consulting background, I always kind of pushed away from what was presented as the smart advice of specialize really deep in not only this sector but this type of business within that sector, this geographic location, drill down, drill down, drill down. And it just didn't seem as fun to me, so I ignored it. But you point back to this diversity of clients as helping to maintain a bold and unblanded perspective. How did you come to that idea of being intentionally sector agnostic?
I think for me as a creative, it goes right back to my early studies. Like I always wanted to be a multidisciplinary creative. I never wanted to just do brand packaging. I never wanted to just do campaign. For me, creativity is alive and it can be used and to solve problems, but it can be used across a multitude of different briefs, really. And for me, I think the canvas, then the channel that you apply that to, it is different. But actually, if you bring a big creative idea to that, you will achieve the powers of transformation within branding. So you allude to it. It keeps it interesting. It keeps it exciting. I still love coming to work every day, and I think the difference of the business sector and the difference of the channel that we get to work on, and every creative here gets to work across the board. We don't have packaging designers and comms designers. Every person in the agency works across that breadth of work. It keeps it interesting, but then it also allows diversity of perspective and thought to come cross channel. So, in the way that we might get a packaging labeling, well, maybe we can treat that like a Japanese poster and not just a label. Maybe we can bring our thinking from a fashion brand into the world of electronic vehicles. What there are interesting connections, and thinking out of category, I think, broadens the perspectives that you can bring into different clients' work.
You talked about we talked about it from the perspective of clients, and you said something really interesting there as well, because I think it is easy in the branding marketing agency business to also get kind of siloed internally too, that these are the packaging people, these are the identity people, and breaking down some of those walls, it seems like it has delivered yet another level of creative spark, diversity, unbland thinking.
Yeah, no, I think so. So, we are all about, you know, um, using the power of creativity to drive transformative change. And I really believe in creativity as a kind of a magical force in many ways. It can make the invisible visible. It can make problems disappear. And I think keeping it rich, keeping it interesting, every day you turn up, you're using that creativity for a different use case, keeps it alive. The brain's a muscle, and if you can keep using that in different ways, it will only strengthen your creative output to be able to do it, cross channel, cross business sector, as opposed to getting too restrained within a particular, a particular business or sector or discipline.
On Brand will be right back after this. Now, back to the show. So, from the client perspective, many today, when you talk about unblanding and leaving in the quirkiness, the ephemera, it can be scary because there's a fear often on the client side of things of being polarizing. But you argue that a brand needs to look sound and stand for something, even if that means not being for everyone. So when you hear that on the other side of the table, how do you respond to, hey, let's just play it safe here. We don't want to stand out too much.
I mean, I think you have to bring it back down to the fact that people want emotional connection with their brands. People don't want sameness and safeness. There is so much individuality that is thriving out there. There is nuance in all of us, and I think we need to dive into that. I mean, just look at internet subcultures and cottage core to normcore. People are looking for brands that appeal to them and say, that brand is for people like me. And if you do that and a brand creates itself for everyone, it won't appeal to anyone because people won't be able to see themselves in it. And I think there's clear statistic evidence that people resonate with and then purchase brands that they have a stronger emotional connection with. So the commercial facts and figures are also there. And, we use that in our strategic argument. And it is our jobs to sell in braver work and help clients feel more confident with the braver work and why that is actually going to be a greater commercial success for them when they put that type of work out there in the market.
So one dynamic that I feel like has come up a couple of times in this, and it does seem like, at the risk of going down a design rabbit hole, it does seem like we're having this kind of minimalist, maximalist tug of war. You mentioned, cottage core. I think about, even though it's temporary and it's just to celebrate. I think about the push and pull with the Spotify disco ball anniversary logo that has the internet up in arms for for maybe not being as clean and minimalist as people are used to. So, in leading creatives through this push and pull dynamic, how are you teaching the team, leading the team on building visual systems that work seamlessly on digital platforms without falling into the trap that we talked about before of sans serif, carefully crafted neutrality?
I think for us, it will always be, it has to have an idea at the heart of it. And if you've got an idea at the heart of your brand, your logo, your system, you will create something memorable. You will be able to communicate with an audience. And I think so long as you've got that core idea and it comes to life in a dynamic, interesting way, if we start there, you will always get work out there that doesn't fall back into just that safeness and simplicity that we're talking about with branding. And that has been schooled in me from the day that I started studying branding. I always feel quite proud of the fact that Bob Gill, grandfather of design, taught my tutor at university, who taught me, and then I came through the doors here at what was then Williams Murray Ham under Garrick Ham. Always about the idea and the concept. And so long as we can keep that in the work, you will always have something that resonates and feels distinctive within a brand.
Well, and it seems that idea, because I think sometimes things can be, it seems like, could seem to the folks that we're piling on the sans serif and the carefully crafted. But when there's nothing behind that, when it's just, the style points, that's how you modernize something, that even some of those classic brands that have been minimal, there are still important ideas behind that, leading that it's not just minimal for the sake of minimal, that it is what we're really talking about, it seems, is idea-driven branding, yes?
Idea-driven branding, distinctiveness, having something to say. And I talk to the team, back to the point, how do we install that the work kind of becomes that? I always talk about the work. What does it say? Not what does it look like? And of course, what it looks like is part of that, and it's the way, but every single design decision, your color, your kerning, your typeface, everything that you bring, what is it saying? Why is it there? And if you can analyze that and you can think about the work talking to people and not just looking like something, I think you always will drive something meaningful in the work.
So when we think about that big idea, is there a question, a set of questions that you ask clients, creatives, to consider at the beginning of a project?
There's not a set of questions. I think we will always get to a point in the brief that will push it, we'll get the initial ideas out there, and there always has to be okay, but what if? Actually, which is the one now that we're going to push? And are there any here that we wouldn't want to see out there in the world? So if there's one that we wouldn't want the client to choose, it doesn't go in. And when we're looking at our own work, if there's not one in there that has a question of what if, are we pushing it far enough? Are we going to, if it gets out there, be glad that people say, how did you get away with that? Then we're probably not doing our job properly and pushing the work strongly enough.
So we've talked a bit about your work. Is there a brand that is your favorite one for people as you're talking through this to point to and illustrate, there's an example of what I'm talking about that resisted the urge to blend in?
Yeah, there's plenty out there. It's not that all brands are falling into this trap. A really great example of it, has to be Liquid Death. They've taken a category there, and they've really lent into personality. There was a talk recently from their CEO titled "Entertain or Die." because boring brands die quiet deaths. And they know what they're talking about. They're doing water in a kind of punk, like a punk media agency, instead of the normal tropes and that sort of sea of sameness that we see out there in the rest of the water category. So that's one great example. I think there's some really exciting work happening at the moment with the advent of creative code, and I think no longer should we be designing for machines, as I'm arguing about, to get this simplicity in there. Actually, machines are now allowing us to create identities that are living brandscapes that are different at every touch point. If you can tap into all of the live data sets that are out there in the world, you can have a brand that has the same DNA to it, but it talks a little bit differently in one market. It can talk a bit different to this particular person who has these particular preferences. So it can stay relevant. It can still guardrail itself and be safe in the way that it turns up in those different areas, but it can have nuance. And again, it's about that emotional connection with people. And I think that we're at a really, really exciting time for brand identity with that in mind, and it puts the blandification brands at even higher risk of being just stuck in the past. I was lucky enough to be at D&AD Festival this week, and there was a fantastic lecture from Talia Cotton at Cotton Studio, and their paintbrush is code, and their design systems are fully alive, fully active, and coming to life in with data sets differently across all of the different touch points. And I really do believe that is where the most exciting data systems of the future will be based.
It's an exciting time and an important conversation to be had, and a conversation that has made me smile many times. So it is now my turn to get to ask you, Mark, for a brand that has made you smile recently.
Well, Nick, there's so much of it out there, and as I say, I love what I do, and I love seeing the work that people are doing, and in my everyday, I'm always seeing stuff that gives me a smile. But I think the people that are doing it the best are the ones that are really leaning into that personality, but the ones that really get to me are the ones that have a bit of daring about them and a bit of irreverence at the same time. I think The Ordinary are doing like fantastic things. They really know what they're about. They talk to their audience in a really unique, irreverent, slightly surreal at times way, which is great. I think Nike is still doing it. There was a great sign up here not so long ago that was, running in London is awful. I love it. And it's just got that daring to say, it's a bit shit out there, but actually, we understand that for you guys. We're really talking to you. So bold personality, a clear voice, and a bit of daring mixed with a bit of irreverence is the stuff that's always brings a smile to my face.
Well, and you talk about a bit of daring too, and it makes me think of the sign that was up in Boston that they had runners welcome, walkers tolerated, which offended some. But I think it's important to highlight that in what you're talking about being bold and taking those swings and reinforcing everything that you just said, that it's sometimes not being everything to everyone as well.
I'm glad that you brought that up. I was hoping we could go there because I think they backed out of that. Nike aren't talking to everyone. That isn't the brand to do it. We just do it. We're about getting people out there. And I think there is a risk of homogenizing and playing it too safe. I know that ASICS came out off the back of it for runners, walkers, and everyone. I mean, how forgettable, Nike should have doubled down on that and stood their ground, I think, and said, we're speaking to this audience and not everyone at this moment in time.
So, Mark, where can we send folks to learn more about who you are and what you do?
You can always get me personally on LinkedIn at Mark Nichols, but check out the website WMH&I.com. You'll see everything that we're about, the way that we approach branding, from the fantastic work, award-winning work that hopefully we can continue to create. So yeah, they're the best two places.
Awesome. Well, we will link up to that in our show notes, which folks can always find at onbrandpodcast.com. Mark Nichols, thanks for being on brand with us.
It's been great. Thanks, Nick.
On Brand is part of the Marketing Podcast Network. If you like what you're hearing, if we've made you smile, you can always listen free on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever your favorite platform may be. And please take a moment and rate and review the podcast to help others find the show. Until next week, I'm Nick Westergaard, and I'll see you on the internet.